She shifted in her seat, glancing around the dimly lit sanctuary, trying to focus, but her mind wouldn't stop racing. The pastor's words were just echoing in the room and settling in the room. Trust God. Even when it doesn't make sense, trust God. She could feel her husband's steady presence sitting there beside her with his hands folded in his lap, and she wished that she could be as calm as he seemed to be. But inside her, a battle was raging. The weight of their reality sat heavy on her and almost enveloped her. The bills stacked on the counter at home, the grocery trips where she calculated every dollar, the couch in their tiny living room that was falling apart, a constant reminder of what they didn't have. But then a whisper, a thought, a nudge. She swallowed hard with her heart pounding and thought, no, that's crazy. But the thought refused to leave. She leaned in close to her husband, barely breathing, and whispered, "What if we gave it?" He slightly turned his head toward her with his brow furrowed and said, Gave what? The furniture money. She felt her throat tighten even as she said it, and she thought, did I just say that out loud? The silence between them stretched, and her pulse was beating in her ears. She saw the flicker of hesitation in his eyes, and she felt the weight of the question she just asked. They had been saving for months, pinching pennies, making do. This wasn't extra money. This was hope. This was progress. And yet something inside her knew this is bigger than furniture. Her husband exhaled slowly, continued to just look forward. And for a second she thought he would say no, but then he nodded. No discussion. No debate. Just trust. Her fingers gripped his hand as they wrote the check, and her stomach twisted, and her mind was screaming, "This is irresponsible." And yet, as she dropped that check into the offering box, a strange thing happened. She expected regret, but instead she felt peace. And months later, God did what only God can do, by not just providing, but multiplying. Not just meeting their needs, but growing their faith in ways they never expected and could not have seen coming. Because the generosity, it was never about what they were giving up. It was about what God was about to do. Today is not about money. It's about faith. It's about trust. It's about stepping into the kind of generosity that actually unlocks God's best for us. And for some of us in this room, this moment, today, this morning, could actually be the turning point. Not just for us, but for the lives that will be forever changed through our obedience. But before I go any further, I want to say just a word to those of you that are here for the first time. I'm thrilled that you're here. And I want you to know that you're going to get a very transparent look at how we think and what we believe about generosity. But let me be clear, today's message is not just about money. It is about faith. It is about trust. It is about the incredible ways that God can work in our lives when we step out in generosity. It's about transformation and the impact we can have on others. And I recognize that you walk through these doors dealing with something. Everybody has a something. On every single row, there's heartbreak. In every single section, there's doubt. Pain fills this room from emotions that have been betrayed or wrecked. Many of you are struggling to figure out different aspects and areas of your life. Some of you are dealing with the hard step of forgiveness, and the hardest person to forgive is you, because you're living the consequences of some poor choices. We all do. But I wonder if you're looking for answers here that can actually be found here. I wonder, although it may not seem like we're talking about a subject that deals with what you're wrestling with, I wonder if, in fact, we're talking about the very thing that God's calling you to take a step of faith that will unlock what He wants to do in the area that you're wrestling. Jesus gives us this powerful picture of what faith-filled generosity looks like in Mark. The Bible's divided into two sections, Old Testament, New Testament. The New Testament, the first 4 books we call the Gospels, they go over the life of Christ. And Matthew Mark's second book, it's way better than a book. It's an ancient document that's actually fully inspired by the Holy Spirit of God, fully the Word of God, written through human authors. And here's what we find. Jesus sat down opposite the place where the offerings were put and watched the crowd putting their money into the temple treasury. Many rich people threw in large amounts. Pause. How rich do you have to be for God to call you rich? Many rich people threw in large amounts, but a poor widow came and put in 2 very small copper coins worth only a few cents. Calling his disciples to him, Jesus said, "Truly I tell you, this poor widow has put more into the treasury than all the others. They all gave out of their wealth, but she out of her poverty put in everything, all she had to live on." It's not hard. It's not a stretch. In fact, it makes complete sense. Whether you believe these verses or not, the reality that they speak is the rich gave what was easy, the widow gave what cost her everything. And when she took that step, she gave all. Not half, not the leftovers, not what was comfortable. She gave all, a three-letter word that literally means so much. And when she did that, Jesus doesn't just notice her, He actually celebrates her. It's the kind of generosity that moves the heart of God. Because God doesn't measure the amount. God measures the trust. And you can find it, the principles that chase each other from the beginning of the Bible to the end, all woven throughout Scriptures that apply to every single area, not just finances, but to our relationships, to how we live, to our integrity, to our marriages, to our parenting. There are these principles that are sort of universal. They apply to every area of life. And part of it is this: when you trust God with little, He moves little. When you trust God with more, He moves more. But when you trust God with everything, He transforms everything. If you're a part of C3, you know that about 10 months ago, we stepped into something called Ignite. And my prayer for each of us in the life of C3 through Ignite has been that God would unleash His transformative power in our lives. And last week I introduced, we're almost at the halfway point. Next Sunday, if you're a part of C3, I've asked you to bring your commitment card and bring your first offering. If you were here last week, you got one. If you weren't here, you can pick those up in the lobby. If you're a guest and you want to see what we're doing, you can pick that up. There's a one-pager that kind of goes over kind of the specifics of what we're doing. But next week, we bring these commitment cards and we bring our first offering. And over the last year, through Ignite, we have seen what I would call modern-day miracles, and I don't think that's a stretch. We've seen 423 people last year give their life to Jesus in this room, which is incredible, 423 people. What's interesting to me, that's the largest amount of people we've ever seen get saved in one year, and it happens to be the year we stepped into this. And by the way, do you know that sometimes churches kind of juice the stats? Do you know that? How many do you have on Sunday morning? 8,000, ministerially speaking. No, you don't. 423 people. That's not 100 people texting in 4 times. Like we only count the text the first time somebody sends it in. 423 people. through your faithfulness, through your inviting, through your praying, through your serving, through your investing. One family who was struggling took a leap of faith. They gave for the first time. They'd been a part of C3, but they'd never given. Even though it scared them, they gave. Weeks later, the husband got a promotion that went way beyond just covering their needs. It also gave them more time together as a family. As a faith family together in 2024, we put over 20,000 meals on tables where there was once hunger, and so much more. This is what generosity does. This is what obedience unlocks. This is what faith in action looks like. It's what generosity makes possible. It is about changed lives. It's about families restored. It's about hope reignited. I think of Proverbs in the Old Testament. It's been called the book of wisdom. It's just full of different nuggets of deep truths that when we apply create wisdom and traction in our lives. The Bible says one person gives freely, yet gains even more. Another withholds unduly. Sounds like an Italian dish. Unduly. What is that? Another withholds unduly. Another word is unacceptably. What is it to withhold unacceptably? To do less than what God has called us to do. One person gives freely, yet gains even more. Another withholds unduly or unacceptably, but comes to poverty. A generous person will prosper. And what is fascinating to me about that? There are no other qualifiers. A generous person who prays at least 3 times a day. A generous person who attends church every single week. A generous person who reads their Bible at least 6 days a week. There are no other qualifiers. It just says a generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. Here's the principle. The more we give, the more we gain. And don't think so small that you only think financial. The more we give, the more we gain. Because when we trust God with everything, He transforms everything. It's true not just financially, it's true in every single area of life. It's counterintuitive. The world says, hold on, but God says, let go. The world says, protect what's yours, but God says, trust me. The world says, play it safe. But God says, step into blessing. Because when you trust God with everything, He transforms everything. And I know some of you might be thinking, what if I do this? What if I fill out this commitment card and I bring it next Sunday? What if I give and nothing changes? What if I don't see a return? Here's the truth. Generosity isn't transactional. It's transformational. It's about trusting God to be faithful to His promises, even if we don't see the results immediately. We are so bad about chasing immediately. Like back in January, a month ago, you set some goals. You don't call it a New Year's resolution because that just sort of, you don't want to label it that. You called it goals, and you set some goals, and one of them was to be healthier. So you went on a diet, and you ate a salad for lunch. You didn't lose any weight by dinner, so you had Krispy Kreme. Like you tried it for half a minute. No. The pattern here is not occasional or momentary obedience. The pattern here is a lifestyle of saying yes to what God has called me to do and is asking me to do. It's about trusting God to be faithful to His promises because there is a time-tested reality. It's always worked for all time, for all people, anywhere on the globe. It's not isolated to just a few people. It's available for everybody. God is always faithful. God's always faithful. Now, you've been listening. You're processing. You're absorbing. And maybe because we're not talking about money, we're talking about faith, but it does deal with money, maybe you've sort of checked out and you're thinking, next Sunday's the Super Bowl. I can't wait. The Eagles play the refs. It's going to be awesome. I can't wait till we get to next weekend. Maybe that's how you're processing, but just hang with me for just a moment. There's a question simmering beneath the surface of your thoughts. And here's the question. You're asking it under the surface of your thoughts today, but you ask it every Sunday. In fact, you ask it every day, at every conversation and every decision. And here's the question. So what? So what? So what does this mean for me? So what difference would this actually make in my life? So what do I do now? It's very simple. Hearing this won't change you. doing something about it will. I read something this past week that sort of rattled me because of how true it was. And what I read was this. You have the opportunity to grow. I have the opportunity to grow in 2025 more than we ever have in our lives. You can grow as an individual. You can grow as a husband or as a wife. You can grow in your family. You can grow in your spiritual maturity. You can grow in your health. You can do all of that this year more than ever before if you never read one book, if you never listen to one podcast, if you never read one news article, if you don't learn anything new whatsoever, you can grow more than you ever have in your life this year. How? By just doing what you already know that you're not doing. It's interesting to me. We know so much that we discount and we don't want to do, so we try to go learn something new when we already know exactly what we need to do to get where we'd like to be. Hearing this won't change you. Doing something about it will. And some of you right now, you're standing at a crossroads between what you know and what you're doing. How big is the gap in your life between knowledge and transformation? Between what you know and what you actually do? And what would it take to shrink that gap? Information alone won't change you. Application will. Because when you trust God with everything, He transforms everything. Now, some of you, you're still stuck on the first passage I read where the widow gave everything, and you're thinking, whoa, 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 whoa. Are we flipping a switch? Are you about to say that next Sunday we're supposed to bring everything we have? We're supposed to empty the bank accounts, empty the investments, empty the retirement, sell the car, sell the house, sell the dog, sell a kid or two. Like, are you saying that, like, is this where we're going as a church now? No, let me define everything for you. What does everything mean? Remember, I asked you to be praying. And this week, together, we're going to be praying about what God would have you do. Everything means everything God asks you to do. Whatever amount He reveals to you to be a part of Ignite, nothing less and nothing more. That's your everything. And here's your so what. You're not here just to listen. You're here to be changed. I don't think anybody in this room got up this morning and thought, you know what? My life is so boring, I have absolutely nothing to do. Why don't I pop into church today and just listen? I hope I get nothing out of it. I'm not going to do anything with it. I just want to be there because I've got an hour to spend. In fact, I've got a lot, so I'll spend an hour there. I'm just going to come listen. You know what the crazy thing is? 423 people last year gave their life to Jesus. A lot of people's lives were changed last year. But there have also been a lot of people that walked in and out of this room last year that absolutely nothing happened. You're wasting your time. What's the point of this if you're not going to take something from the Word of God and do something with it? You're not here just to listen. You're here to be changed. So what's God asking you to do? For some of you, it's time to take your first step. So many new people in the life of C3 in just the last year. We've gone from 2 services to 3 services. The way you guys keep inviting me, look around. We're in the second month of the year. We're packed. We'll be in 4 services probably by the end of the year. Part of Ignite, a chunk of Ignite is the next step. We are outgrowing these facilities, and we can do 6, 7, 12 services a weekend, but services at 2 a.m., nobody attends. And so we need to be able to have more space for optimal times. And some of you weren't here, and now this is an opportunity for you to pray and ask God what He would have you do and how you could be a part. That's your first step. For others, it's time to step into trusting God at a deeper level. The older I get, and I'm fitting on your business. You thought I was 29, so you're shocked right now. But the older I get, the more I have a desire and a passion in my life not to put anything on cruise control. I want to continue to grow into who God's called me to be. I want to be the husband, the father, the grandfather, the pastor, the friend, the neighbor. I want there to be spiritual momentum in my life. And so even in this area of generosity, man, I'm not in any area of life where I need to be, but I'm certainly not where I was. And I want to see momentum. I can't look at one area of my life, forgiveness, kindness, self-control, love. I can't look at one area of my life where I'd say, I'm just going to put that on cruise control. I want to go further. I want God to do more in and through me. Is your giving, your generosity, is it on cruise control? Are you like the people that God called wealthy that just, you give, but you don't even feel it? It all makes sense. It's logical. It works on paper. There's nothing supernatural about it. It's time to take a step, to trust at a deeper level. And for some of you, because of how God has blessed you in financial ways and what he's done in your life and the gifts that you have, for some of you, God may be calling you to give in a way that is transformational, not only in your life, but in this church and as a result in this city. This is your moment. Eminem was right. This is your moment. Don't wait for next time. Don't wait for next month. Don't wait for when things feel easier. God is speaking to you right now. The question is, will you trust him? Will you move? Will you step into the blessing that he has for you? Because when you trust God with everything, he transforms everything. So this week, you're going to be asking, I'm going to be asking, those of us that are part of C3, what's my next step? And when he speaks, move. Set a pattern and a habit in your life that the you of 5 years from now will give the you of today a standing ovation for, and that is, say yes, and God will bless. Whatever God asks you to do, set a pattern of saying yes. He might nudge you to take a step that feels scary, but I promise you it'll be worth it. Because when you step into generosity, you're stepping into God's purpose and design for your life. Like last week, imagine a church where every hungry child is fed because of your generosity. Imagine a place where marriages are restored and teenagers find hope. Imagine a city transformed because we step into faith. Before the beginning of time, God knew that you would be in this room on this day. And he knew what we would talk about. You're not here by accident. God brought you here today because he's stirring something in you. Don't ignore it. Don't try to shake it. Allow God to take you to the uncomfortable places because that's where you grow. The only question left is, will you say yes? Will you say yes to the wealth of emptiness, giving that leads to true spiritual abundance? As a church together, let's say yes to the pain of blessing, sacrificial generosity that unlocks joy. Let's together say yes to the strength of surrender, letting go and receiving divine strength more than anything you or I could muster up. Let's say yes to the gain in loss, losing what's temporary to gain the eternal. Let's say yes to the power of small, because even the smallest act of generosity creates transformation. Yes, let's say yes to the boldness of big, because some of you, God has positioned you in a unique way to be transformative not only in your life, but in the church and community and how you give. This is what Ignite is all about. Lives changed, families restored, hope reignited, and a city transformed. And it starts with one simple, radical act. Step in, say yes, and watch what God will do. And as you're asking what God will have you do toward Ignite, as next Sunday we prepare to bring these commitment cards and our first offerings, to put Jesus first financially is not just about what we give. It's just as much about how we manage. So what about the rest of your finances? Because at C3, we don't care about just part of you. We care about all of you. We take a holistic approach to both faith and life, and we want to add value to your life and help you in life. You get a better life by becoming better at life, and one of the practical ways to do that is to say yes to what God's calling you to do, not just with what you give, but how you manage everything else. I've asked Barry Leathers to join me on the platform. He's one of our pastors. He's also a financial coach, and I want to ask him a few questions about the other 90%, because so often in churches, we've earned the reputation of talking about the 10% and ignoring the 90%, and the 90% you're trying to navigate and figure out and creates just as much pressure. We know the spiritual principle. I'd rather live blessed on 90% and bringing Jesus the first 10% of my income like the Bible teaches than trying to live on 100% without the blessings, protection, and provision of God. We know that in principle, but Barry, what's the first step someone should take if they feel overwhelmed by their financial situation?
You feel overwhelmed financially, you are not alone. I've never met an adult who was financially responsible for their life that didn't have some sort of financial obstacle or hurdle or stress in their life at some point. Now, maybe it's a little speed bump for you, but for some of you, you're standing in front of Mount Everest and you're not even sure where to start. And I go back to what Pastor Byron said in the first week of this message series, and he quoted a verse in Matthew that says, with God, all things are possible. So no matter what your financial situation is right now, if it feels hopeless, it's not if you still have breath in your lungs. With God, all things are possible. So what does that look like practically for us? When we are overwhelmed or when we are stressed, so many times we make decisions based out of fear or panic. When I was little, my dad was a recreational pilot. And when I say recreational pilot, he flew these like 2-seater, 4-seater prop planes. Well, I used to go up with him sometimes. And for his certification, one of the things he had to do was wear this like visor or helmet. He wasn't allowed to look out of the cockpit. He had to focus on his gauges and his instruments. And so many times as a pilot, when you're in an emergency situation, if you start looking out at the horizon or looking out of the cockpit, trying to figure out what's going on, you can be fooled, you can be confused. And so this teaches them to say, hey, if bells are going off, alarms are going off, let's focus on the gauges. What is the plane doing? And let's focus on that and fix what we need to. We need to do the same thing in our financial life. For so many of you, your gauges are all off and you're trying to make decisions based on panic and fear. We need to start with a baseline, know where we stand, and the best way to do that is to track what you spend for a month. Every single penny, let's see where it's going. Because once we do that, now we've got a baseline. Now we can establish what our financial strategy needs to be, what decisions we need to make to ensure that we're positioned to partner with God and really make a difference.
And the minute he said track what you spend for a month, some of you thought, I ain't got time for that. Let me prove that you do. Take out your phone and look at your screen time per day. Like, hey, here's the principle. People who change their lives change what they do when they're bored. And you can maximize your time and do some things that are going to help the future you, or you can waste your time. Another question I wrote down. Many people struggle with budgeting, the dirty word. What's the simplest way to create and stick to a budget that works?
Yeah, great question. And I don't like the word budget either. I kind of use financial plan. But the best way to do this is what Dave Ramsey calls, that's where I have my certification from, a zero-based budget. So all that means is we are going to assign a task or a job to every single dollar that comes in. And we're going to do that at the beginning of the month. So we're in control. Because so many times we don't tell our money where to go at the beginning of the month. So we get to the end of the month and we wonder where it went. So that's all a zero-based budget is we are going to assign every single dollar a job. And we're going to make sure that dollar does the job it's assigned to do. And listen, when you start budgeting, there's a few things that I always recommend is be patient. You are not going to get it perfect the first month you budget. It's probably going to take you 3 or 4 months. You're going to have that month where you're like, oh crap, I got to take my dog to the vet. And that bill's going to hurt your feelings. And you're not going to have planned for that. And so there's going to, your holidays, vacations, whatever it might be, it's going to take some time to get good at budgeting, but stick with it. Let's assign every single dollar a job and make sure that we're in control of where our money's going.
That's good. That's good. So many people are dealing with debt, credit card debt, car debt. Debt can be overwhelming. How do we balance paying off debt while saving for the future? How do we do that?
That is a great question. Before I answer that one, I do want to point out there are a few great online tools when it comes to budgeting. We've got a few that we're going to put on the screen. This makes it so much easier. Man, 40 years ago, people were doing this with pencil and paper or manually putting things in on a spreadsheet. Quick and Simplify is what I use. Everydollar.com is Dave Ramsey's software. But both of them you can tie to your bank accounts, tie to your debit cards. It will do the work for you. There's a small fee for it. It's worth the investment, but it makes budgeting so much easier. Okay, so back to like, how do we prioritize? What do we need to focus on when it comes to our finances? So many times we've got 3 or 4 fires going and we don't know which one to put out. And so we try putting all of them out at the same time and we never make any progress. So what Dave Ramsey recommends and what I recommend is let's look at this in steps. He calls them baby steps, but let's do one thing at a time. Let's be focused and intense on one particular financial task. The first is save $2,000 as fast as you can. So you can look at your budget after you track your spending. You're probably going to find some money. You can sell some things. Don't sell your dog, but maybe your cat, whatever you need to do to make sure you've got $2,000 as quickly as possible. Now, why is that important? Because the next step is we're going to pay off debt, any consumer debt that we have, whether it's credit cards, vehicle loans, student loans, because that right there is robbing you of your future. That is income that's going out the door that could be used to invest in your future. But if we don't have a little bit of emergency savings, we're going to start paying down debt. And guess what? The car's going to break down. You're going to have to break out the credit card. You're going to go into more debt again, and we're never going to get ahead. So we're going to save that $2,000. Then we're going to list our debts, smallest to largest, and we're going to pay them off in that order because we want to build momentum. We're not going to care about the interest rate. You don't want to start with your $50,000 student loan because you're not going to feel like you're gaining any momentum. We're going to start with the smallest first. We're going to get some wins. We're going to see that this is working, and that's going to create some momentum for us to be able to pay off debt. And then once our debt is paid off, now you've freed up all of this income to invest in your future and to really start to build wealth.
That's good. That's good. What are some habits or mindset shifts that can help people stay on track financially over the long term? Where this isn't something I just try for a minute, like long term, playing the long game.
Yeah, that's a great word, mindset, because I think so many of us need a paradigm shift when it comes to approaching our finances. And the first I'd recommend is having a stewardship mindset. Pastor Byron's done an amazing job talking about that first 10%, the tithe, actually belonging to God. It's just something we're bringing back to him. But so many times we make the mistake of thinking the other 90% is ours. Like we've given God his, now this is ours. The truth is 100% of it is God's, right? That last 90% is us partnering with him to accomplish his purposes. He gives us that privilege, that opportunity to partner with him. So when we see that we're managers and we're stewards of that other 90%, man, God has given us the resources we need to take care of our family and take care of our community. So we need to have a stewardship mindset. The second thing I recommend is delayed gratification. That is a lost art in our society and so important when it comes to building a financial future. So many times I see people impulsively spend on even some small things, but some large things too. People buy cars they shouldn't buy, they buy houses they shouldn't buy, and it puts you in a bind and you're never able to get ahead. So taking a beat, taking a deep breath before we make a purchase and really asking ourselves, is this something that's going to advance my financial future? Let's employ some delayed gratification so we can build a future and build wealth that really matters for the long run.
Awesome. Last question. For those that feel like I'm having a hard time making ends meet, what small changes can make a big difference in their monthly finances?
Yeah, that's great. I go back to the first thing I said. If you track your finances for 1 month, you are going to be hyper aware of where you're spending and you are going to find some dollars. My wife and I did this for the first time when we were in our mid-20s, and I worked downtown at SunTrust, and I went out to eat every single day. And so $10 or $12 a day didn't seem like that much until we tracked our spending and realized that we're spending like $700 a month eating out. This is not good, and most of that was me. And so you're going to find some areas just by tracking your finances. The second thing I recommend to everybody is shop your insurance. Whether it's your auto insurance, your home insurance, medical insurance, insurance companies are famous for giving you a good introductory rate and then jacking your rates up in years 2 and 3. So you should shop it every single year. I know people that find hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars. We shopped our home insurance a few years ago, saved $1,800 a year just by switching. So there are opportunities when it comes to insurance, man. Keep your vendors accountable. Make sure you're shopping stuff, and you can definitely find some money.
That's awesome. Would y'all help me thank Barry? Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Hey, now for some of you, we just touched on some kind of foundational basics, but some of you might say, man, my situation is so much more complicated, whether it's debt or investments or savings. As I mentioned, Barry's a financial coach. And in Life of C3, remember I said it's about what we want for you, not from you. If you'd like to meet with him, we will cover the first 2 sessions. Most people, it just takes 1 session. All you need to do is email info, I-N-F-O, at c3church.cc, and you can meet with Barry. He can do some financial coaching about where you are, what your goals are, how to achieve that. It's all in the strictest of confidence. He keeps that between y'all. I don't know those details, don't want to. So take advantage of that. Let me share with you just one other story. I want to tell you about a man who knows firsthand what it feels like to be in the exact place some of you are in. To feel the pressure, to not see a way out, and to still say yes to what God's asking him to do and putting Jesus first financially. One morning he sat at his kitchen table, rubbing his temples, staring at the same budget spreadsheet he'd looked at 100 times before. The numbers didn't lie. No matter how he shifted things, no matter what corners he cut, it wasn't enough. And in the back of his mind, there was that money. The money he'd been waiting on for years. The money owed to him from a deal that had gone sideways. A check that should have arrived long ago but never did. At first, he held on to hope. He emailed often. He called over and over. He waited. But months turned into years, and the silence grew louder. And the last message he received, it all but confirmed what he feared. It wasn't coming. It was over. And yet, in the middle of his frustration, in the middle of his waiting, God started whispering, when the timing couldn't seem to be worse, trust me. He felt the nudge. He knew what it meant, give. He wrestled with it hard. God, you see my situation. You know what I'm dealing with, and how can I commit to giving when I don't even know how I'm going to make it work? But the whisper didn't stop. And deep down, he knew obedience doesn't wait for certainty. Obedience is not obedience if we only do it when it's logical and reasonable. There's an aspect of obedience that stepping into faith takes faith. Obedience doesn't wait for certainty. So he did it. He made the commitment. And even though he couldn't see how it would work, even though the math didn't really add up, even though he was still waiting on the money that by now he was sure would never come, he gave faithfully, month after month, trusting that somehow God would provide. And God did, month after month. And then one afternoon, months later, long after he'd stopped thinking about it, he walked outside to check the mail. In the mail, there were bills, there was junk mail, but there was a thick envelope from an attorney's office he didn't recognize. He tore it open and he began scanning the letter, and his heart started beating faster with every word, and then he saw it, a check for over $50,000. $50,000. He blinked and he stared and he read the letter again. Hey, this is not just a great story. This is not some illustration I made up to teach a point. This actually happened. I know because I know the man, I know the situation. I've changed some details for privacy. But the pressure, the time frame, and the amount, it's all 100% true. It was the money that he'd been waiting on for years. The money he thought he would never see. And it had come now. Not when he begged for it, not when he worried over it, not when he tried to control it, but after he stepped out in faith. And not right away, after a period of time. After he let go of his plan and trying to figure it out and just started working God's plan that God laid out in his word. He dropped the letter onto the table. His hands were trembling and he was overwhelmed. Not just because of the money, but because of the moment. Because now he knew, beyond a shadow of a doubt, God sees, and God knows, and God provides. Have you ever trusted so much that you got to live one of these moments? It was unquestionable. He knew now. God is always faithful. He's always faithful. And that's what happens when we say yes to God over and over and over and over again. And God's not done writing these kinds of stories. I believe he's waiting on some of you in this very room to say yes, just like this man did. And maybe your story won't involve a check in the mail. Maybe it'll be a different kind of blessing in your life. But when we trust him, we position ourselves to see his faithfulness in ways we could never expect. And some of you might be thinking, great story, but does it really happen like that? As a pastor, one of the things that I have to live by and adhere to for the sake of integrity is confidentiality. There's so many things I would love to share with you that I can't from people's lives as they ask me to pray for them or tell me different things, but does it really happen like that? All the time. All the time. God is waiting for some in this room to say yes. And when you do, don't be surprised when your own out-of-nowhere kind of miracle shows up in your mailbox or your inbox or in ways you never saw coming. Because at the end of the day, it's not really about money. It's about faith. It's about obedience. It's about stepping into the unknown and watching God do what only God could do. How badly do you want to see that in your life? And are you willing to say, God, what do you want me to do? And whatever he says, just say yes. Would you pray with me? Father, I'm so grateful that in your word, you in very practical ways give us a roadmap for life. The patterns on how to live in relationships with people, how to live in relationship with you. The patterns on how to live in financial freedom. And Father, you know, I want so desperately for every single person in this room to live in that place, to experience you unleashing your transformative power in their lives. So I pray for every person they call C3 Church their home church, that over the next week we would seek you, we would pray, and you would show us what you would have us do, and then we would just say yes. We would put ourselves in that place of responding to you, leaning into faith over fear, and then watching what you do in a way that only you can. You may be here in this room this morning with heads bowed and eyes closed, and you know deep in your heart and life, the first area that you need to say yes is in God's invitation to know him personally. For some of you, the greatest need in your life is to know God in a personal way. And that happens through inviting Jesus to come into your life. If that's the step you need to take today, I would love to lead you in a very simple prayer. A prayer where you invite Jesus to come into your life. Ask God to forgive your sin, to give you a home in heaven after this life, and to give you his Spirit to live inside you, to walk with you day by day in this life, and give you wisdom and discernment and guide you. If that's the step you need to take today, I mean, I can't think of one good reason to wait. And I can't think of one good reason not to do it. I would love to lead you in a prayer. So if that's the step you'd like to take, just pray this prayer. You can pray it out loud, or you can pray it in the quietness of your heart. The Bible says that Jesus knows even our thoughts. You just pray this prayer. Dear God, I know that I need you. Jesus, please come into my life. Forgive my sin. And help me to live for you. As best I know how, I give you my life. Thank you for loving me. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you so much for watching with us today. If you prayed that prayer, Pastor Byron would love to know so that he could be praying for you. If you want to text your name to 407-487-8311. We also want to thank you so much for your faithful generosity. If you'd like to give, you can go to givec3.cc. If you're in the Orlando area, we would love to see you on Sundays at 8:15, 9:45, and 11:15. Can't wait to see you there.